Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Retirement is more than just a finish line. It's a whole new beginning. Imagine waking up each day free from the grind of work, but suddenly facing a maze of financial decisions you never expected. Now, have you ever wondered if you'll have enough to last a lifetime? Or what happens if you outlive your savings? What if life throws you a curveball like a late life divorce, the loss of a spouse, or even the unexpected need to move in with your children for support? Today, we're diving deep into the secrets and surprises of retirement planning. And this isn't just about numbers. It's about preparing for the real life twists and turns that could shape your golden years. So to help us unlock the wisdom you need to retire with confidence and peace of mind, I'm joined by Sara Zollo. She's a senior wealth advisor at Assante Capital Management. Sara, welcome to Empowered. Great to see you again.
Hey, Liz, thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. How much will
Okay.
I need to retire comfortably as a woman?
So that's a great question. I get that question a lot, especially just at social events when people find out what I do. It's not a one size fits all answer. I wish I could say, make sure you have $1 million and you'll be fine. It really, really depends on you, right? How much do you plan to spend in retirement? That's probably the biggest variable. So a couple of high level factors that people can use as some takeaways. So you need to know what you're going to be spending in retirement. That's typically between 60 to 80% of what you're currently spending. What I've seen though in my practice is that a lot of our clients need 80% upward. So 80 to 100% actually of what they're currently spending. What happens is they think that their lifestyle is going to change a lot. But when we really do some detailed budget work, some expenses fall off and some new expenses come on. So maybe they won't be, their kids are going to move out and their, grocery costs are going to go down, but now they're going to be traveling more. So it's one thing sort of replaces the other. So I see 80% and above is kind of like the amount you might need. And then you got to look at what we call, basically secure forms of income in retirement, which would be like your pensions, whether from your workplace or from the government, like CPP and OAS. So you got to figure out how much you need annually in retirement. Again, usually about 80 plus of what you're currently spending now. And then subtract out what you're getting from guaranteed pension sources. And that difference needs to come from your own personal savings. So your investment portfolio typically. And again, high level rule of thumb, you can use a 4% withdrawal rate. That should give you a sense of working backwards. What's that dollar amount? How much do you need in investable assets to retire? But again, it gets a little bit more granular than that. So it's hard to give kind of a one size fits all response there.
And I get that. And I just want to go back and talk about CPP as Canada Pension Plan and OAS as Old Age Security. And we're going to talk about that further in the show. But I also want to talk about the fact that we have to consider the impact of longevity in our retirement plan.
Yes.
Women typically live longer than men. So tell us about that.
On average, women are living about 3 years longer than men. And you really see this when you look at a lot of the retirement residents or long-term care facilities in Canada, predominantly being, full of women. So it's interesting because as women, we can live longer than men, but we're still only making about 75% of our male counterparts for the same job, right? Plus, we could have some childbearing years, and we also are typically the ones that will take care of aging parents. So we have more years potentially out of the workforce, and then the years that we are there, we're earning 25% less. Longevity is very important when you come to retirement planning for a variety of reasons, probably more important for women for those reasons I just mentioned.
Mhm.
You want to make sure that if you're running a financial plan, you run that plan at least to age 100. So you're factoring in longevity and not creating a scenario where you could outlive your assets.
And you know what? That makes a lot of sense because we are all living longer, male, female, we're all living longer. So we really have to put that at the back of our minds that, it's not just 80, 85, 90. Putting a plan in until you're 100 actually makes sense because there's a lot of people that are actually living longer than 100. When we come
Yes.
back, we're going to talk about dealing with the fact that you don't have a pension, and how basically you can start regenerating income in retirement. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today we're discussing things to know before you retire. So, Sara, those without a pension, and there are a lot of people without pensions, we all need to think of a plan for generating income in retirement. What are options?
Yeah, so we're seeing, you're right, a lot more people not having pension plans in place. That's actually becoming the norm.
Mhm.
I'll say a couple of things. A lot of people are actually talking about retirement in a more as a more of a gray zone, not so definitive. I'm actually going to stop working at a specific age. Working part-time in retirement is becoming more popular. Doing something in maybe a different field that like brings you joy but still generates income is becoming more popular. Um, so it could also be even consulting for the previous firm that you were working for, or seeing if they'll take you on a contract basis. That's also becoming more popular. If you're in a couple, what we do typically see is that both people don't retire at the same time, and that's actually recommended because now you can sort of ease into retirement from a income perspective. One person's income is theoretically stopped, and then now you kind of have the other person's income for a little while longer. Um, but there's some scary statistics if we bring it back to women. And I think it comes back to a lack of planning. So unfortunately, 7 out of 10 women will not be able to financially retire.
Yeah.
So they'll be working in retirement because they have to, not necessarily because they want to. It's for a variety of reasons. Divorce is a big reason for that. The baby boomer generation still accounts for about 50% of divorces in that cohort. And that can really affect your preparedness for retirement. Also because you're having to basically have individual expenses like housing costs rather than sharing those with someone. And female widowhood, the average age of that in Canada is age 56, believe it or not.
Yep.
And that's pre-retirement typically. So that can oftentimes, like over 50% of women after being widowed will not be able to maintain their standard of living.
So,
So it all comes back to preparedness.
so what
Yeah.
happens if somebody in their 50s gets a divorce right now? What are their
Yeah.
options?
Well, you really want to probably work really closely with the family lawyer or a financial advisor to really understand the implications of that. So in Canada, a lot of financial assets would be divisible, like your pension or your partner's pension, CPP credits, Canada Pension Plan credits, the family home. So there's a lot of changes. When it comes to the family home, it's typically is one partner buying out the other, or you forced to sell that home. And in a lot of cases, especially in Canada, the primary residence is a big source of equity
Yeah.
for that family, because maybe they've been focusing actively on paying down their mortgage and haven't been saving as much. And so now all of a sudden that it needs to be divided, and it can really change your readiness for retirement. So getting professional advice would be crucial in those scenarios, and it can change probably like when you can retire. So if you're planning to retire, it may actually move the goalpost a little bit if you have a divorce pre-retirement.
Have you seen any couples that you know of that have decided to defer a divorce or not have a divorce because it would completely change the lifestyle that they're accustomed to right now?
Yes, we have seen that. I have seen that in my practice where like partners talk to us. One of them may talk to us in confidence about wanting to separate and then choose not to once they understand fully the financial implications. What we're seeing, like again, going back to the baby boomer generation, is they're trying to wait until their kids are sort of out of the house before making those big decisions because they want, their lifestyle to be similar for their children. But then after the kids are out of the house, that's typically when they're willing to potentially pursue a separation, depending on the situation. But yeah, we've seen people forgo that or delay that for a variety of reasons.
So we're it's about a minute before we go to break, and you've brought up Canada
Yeah.
Pension Plan a couple of times. How do you know
Yes.
if you will receive a full Canada Pension Plan or old age security benefits, and when should you take them?
Okay, so great question. Two great questions. I'll start on the latter one because we get that more often, like when to trigger it.
Mhm.
Um, Basically, if you take it early, you take a reduced pension. So if you take CPP, Candidate Pension Plan, before age 65, it's reduced. If you take it at 65 or later, it's full pension or increased for every month past your 65th birthday. The crossover math is if you live beyond about age 74 to 76, you should have waited to take your CPP.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So,
If you are still working, I think there's a very weak argument to begin collecting your CPP. Some people say I'll take it and invest it, but I don't think that's the smartest.
hold that thought right now, Sarah, because
Okay.
this is a big conversation that I want to have with
Yes.
you. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more.
All right.
Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today we're discussing things to know before you retire. Now, Sarah, before we went to the commercial break, we were talking about Canada Pension Plan and old age
Mhm.
security. And you were discussing, when you should take it. And please continue.
Sure. So I was mentioning that the crossover age, if you live beyond 74 to 76, you typically should have waited to start your CPP at 65 onward. The arguments for taking CPP prior to 65 would be strongest, in my opinion, if you have a reason to believe you have a reduced life expectancy, so poor health maybe, or some type of chronic or degenerative illness, or you're not working and you really need the income. Okay. If you're working between 60 and 65, we don't typically recommend it. And when we run the numbers into our financial planning software, the results typically look better if CPP is actually delayed until 65, because then there's no reduction factor. So when you do take it early being anywhere between 60 and 65, it's reduced by 0.6% for every month before your 65th birthday. So that's a 36% reduction if you take it at age 60.
Oh,
People
wow.
do tend to, I think people tend to underestimate their longevity. So most people will live beyond 74 to 76. So again, typically you want to wait, especially if you're still working. So let's say you're 68, you're still working. I think the argument is there to not begin the CPP because it's a taxable benefit. So you're going to have your employment income plus your CPP income on top of that. So it's being taxed at a very high tax rate. And you want to probably just time that to commence when you do actually fully retire or you're in a lower income tax bracket. CPP you need to apply for. Very important. Some people think you're just going to automatically start receiving CPP. That's not the case. You do need to apply for it. And good rule of thumb is to apply for it 6 months before you want it to commence. So if you're trying to have it to start on your 65th birthday, you want to get that application in 6 months prior. Old age security it's a funny one. Sometimes you need to apply for it, sometimes you don't, but we would say best practices apply for that as well, and that you cannot take prior to 65. So you can defer it, which increases the payment, but you can't take it early.
Okay, wow. Good words of wisdom here. I want to talk about retirement security as well. We touched upon divorce,
Yeah.
but I want to talk about widowhood as well. And they both
Yeah.
will affect your retirement security. Any words of wisdom to help you, just to help out?
It's kind of a bit of a pitch for what I do because I believe that what we do is very important. But being a fully licensed financial advisor, I think is so important. There's a statistic that those that work with financial advisors for more than 15 years save almost 4 times more than those that don't. And I think it's kind of like working with a personal trainer, like you can go to the gym and you can work out and you'll, hopefully see some results. But if you work out with a personal trainer, you typically see results much quicker. And because that person's really keeping you accountable. And I think that's kind of a great analogy for what we do with our clients. So what I would recommend for women coming back to, widowhood or divorce is engage a financial advisor. If you and your partner don't currently have one, whether you may or may not find yourself in one of those positions, having a financial advisor that you trust in your corner will really help you through navigate different, moments in your life, right? Preparedness takes about 10 to 15 years, ideally. 10 to 15 years is like a perfect window to begin sort of planning for retirement. And the more you work with a professional, you have a higher chance of being prepared. So I think for women, if you're already working with a financial advisor and you're not engaging in those meetings or you're just letting your husband go to those meetings, I would highly recommend that you change your tune there. Get to know that person, make sure there's someone that you like and trust. But I would be very involved in these conversations.
You know, Sarah, I've been saying that all along on the show as well. Whenever we've had somebody talk about finance, too many women sit back and allow their partners to do all the work. And God forbid the partner goes, they don't know how to write a check. They don't know
Correct.
how where the accounts are. They don't know how to pay
Yep.
certain bills. And you're
Yep.
100% correct. Get involved, ask questions, surround yourself with a lot of really smart people who can help
Yep.
answer your questions, because when it's too late, you're scrambling and nobody wants to
Yes.
scramble throughout all that anyway.
No, the other thing I would add is like around the get involved comment is check all the beneficiaries on RSPs, TFSAs. Are the wills and powers of attorney up to date? Do you have enough life insurance? Are you the beneficiary of insurances that you thought you were the beneficiary of? Their workplace plan, your individual policies? Like these are all important things to know.
And yes, we will continue this discussion when we come back. So please don't go away. More on retirement planning. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today we're discussing things to know before you retire, and I'm speaking with Sara Zollo. She's a senior wealth advisor at Assante Capital Management. Now, moving in with children seems to be a thing right now. Let's talk about moving in and living with children during retirement.
Okay, so my first comment is please proceed with caution.
Yeah.
What I'd recommend there is I know it sounds great and it can, people can have the best of intentions around that, but typically you will lose a lot of control and autonomy. You might lose, a lot of space where you might want to host your own friends or have your own space in the kitchen. A lot of little nuanceable things to consider. So if it's something you want to pursue, consider a trial period prior to making big decisions like selling your home and moving in with a child, because it's difficult to undo that decision and it can create more issues on the back end. The other thing to really be cognizant of is don't make too many big changes all at once. So you just retired and maybe there was, I don't know, a divorce or a death or something. Typically, great rule of thumb is don't make any big decisions for 1 year. Settle in, and kind of see how you're doing on your own before making any big decisions. Another point of consideration is something called sequence of returns. Not a great idea to start lending your kids a ton of money in the first 5 years of retirement. Typically, in those first 5 years, you really want to control and minimize your withdrawal rate. Let your portfolio start growing and accumulating. See what you have left after 5 years. If you're still, on track from with your retirement expenditures, you can speak with your advisor about gifting money to the children and all that. But, it's that old analogy of putting the, air mask on your face first before, helping others.
And Sarah, I love the fact that you said, do not make any major decisions during a material change in your life. And a material change, as you said, is a death, losing your job, a divorce. There's so many things that happen in our lives, and people want to quickly make so many changes in their lives. And that's the
Mhm.
wrong thing to do. And one of the things that you and I were talking about was, you were talking about surrounding yourself with people that will support you.
Yes, yes. It's very important to make sure that you have a good network, especially as you age. Like one of the leading factors for dementia is actually loneliness. So it's so important, again, to make sure that you have connection with family, friends, and even like thinking about what hobbies you'll be doing as you kind of change and transition into retirement. People often aren't currently doing the hobbies that they'll anticipate doing in retirement. So we recommend starting some hobbies and actually making sure that they speak to you and you do enjoy them and you can see yourself continuing them in retirement. A great rule of thumb is do something that's like active and good for your body and something that really speaks to your soul, like maybe painting or something on the creative side. But have like more than one hobby as you enter retirement is very important. And if finances feel overwhelming, but you have a child, for example, that um, feels more confident in these conversations, you can bring them into your meetings with your financial advisor. We see that a lot in our practice, and we're very comfortable with that as long as, as long as our client, the parent, is kind of initiating that. But yeah, having a good support and remaining involved in the community is very important for longevity and aging well.
So, talking about aging well, I want to talk about planning
Mhm.
your estate. A lot
Mhm.
of people don't think about their estate. A lot of people think, I don't have enough money. We have a minute left. Let's talk about powers of attorney and wills.
Yeah, so will dictate what you want to happen once you're dead. A power of attorney will dictate what happens when you're still alive, but you can't actually make decisions for yourself because you're physically or mentally incapacitated. Both documents are very important. I think there's a scary statistic that less than 30% of Canadians actually have a will. So if you do
Wow.
nothing else between now and the balance of the year, please go complete a will. But yeah, you want to dust those off. If you do have them dead, you want to revisit them. A good rule of thumb is maybe every 5 years or after a life changing event. A divorce does not automatically nullify a will. So if you've had a divorce, you need to go physically change your will.
Good point. That's a great point, and that's a good point to end on. And please, as well, add your pets in your wills because you don't want them going back to rescues or anywhere else. Thank you so much, Sarah.
You're welcome. Thanks, Liz.
Sarah always says, control your controllables. So many things feel outside of our control in life, but there are typically many things we can control, like our savings habits, budgeting, and spending to a certain degree. Focus on what is within your control and don't overlook the details. This will help you feel more in control of your finances. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.